Why don't you start?
Well, for me, I thought about that question, and it was very interesting that it ac- the spark actually got lit for me um, because of my father, and I was probably 17 years old, maybe. And what happened was that he sat my brother and I down and said very bluntly that I have been to prison, and I want you to hear it from me. And so he proceeded to tell us about being imprisoned in federal prison for draft evasion. Technically not showing up for his pre-induction physical. He refused to go. And he was not a no-no or anything like that, but he just, when the time came when he got drafted, he said, nope, I'm not going to go. And so he was, put on trial in Denver and eventually ended up in the prison camp in above Tucson, Arizona. And so that story gave me a big push to become involved in things. It was kind of when the time came a few years later to become involved in things when I went to San Jose, I really felt like I was given the okay by my father, in particular, my parents, and really they just basically told me, you're responsible for your own actions. So whatever they may be and whatever the consequence may be, then you have to own up to it. And so when the time came when the teacher strike happened in San Francisco, I wasn't involved in that for a period of time. I was kind of trying to tell people, don't let me get too involved because I wasn't doing so good in school at San Jose State, and it was partly because I was not in the major that I should have been. I changed. I did eventually change from a life science major to a social science major, and so that change came about. And then, of course, the Vietnam War was going on, and when I say we, I mean a group of us, Asian American students at San Jose State, became very involved in the issue of the Vietnam War, and also, three things really. Getting Asian American studies started at San Jose State. That was one of the things. And then the other thing is really establishing an identity of being Asian American and what that meant and all that it entails. So we really went headlong into those areas, and that's my activism. From then we were involved in those three areas.
Right. So mine came from a completely different direction because when I came to California in 1969, I lived on a military base. Well, I grew up going to school on a military base in Japan, a US military base. And so everything was very regimented, and it was a little strange being a Japanese American in Japan. Japanese kids looked at me and said, "You're not Japanese, you're American." And then white kids, of course, said, "Well, you're Japanese American," but it's like that wasn't a big deal because they were all accustomed to seeing people from different places. They had all traveled a lot, and so that wasn't as big of a deal. We didn't have these. I never encountered racist comments from the kids at school. That was something that didn't happen, amazingly. But again, they're supposed to be ambassadors, in a matter of speaking. So when I came here to the United States when I was not even 18 years old, and Dan and his, Terry Cometa jumped out at me from the bushes and said, "Here, come to this meeting." Literally, they really did that.
Yeah.
It was a little scary because they had long hair.
Pretty wild looking
They
bunch.
were pretty raggedy looking, and they're not the people I was accustomed to seeing. I didn't own a pair of jeans in my life because they were supposed to be work clothes, and I mean we weren't even allowed to wear pants to school. Girls weren't. So I was there in my dress and my stockings, walking around campus before school started, and it was just a little scary, but I went anyway. I don't know why. And to hear about the struggles of Asian American, of just people of color in this country, and the history behind Japanese Americans, which I never knew because my father was in Japan during the war. My mother's a Japanese national. So this was all new to me. All this history was really, really new to me. I mean, they didn't even talk about camp, where a lot of songs they heard camp mentioned at home, but there wasn't even talk of that, in my house because it was just not part of my family's culture and history. And so, so here I am sitting in this meeting, people saying things, using language that I hadn't heard before, and I really had learned a lot of vocabulary then, which is not always appropriate in public. And Russ Baba was sitting behind me, and he just poked me and said, it's all right. It's all okay because it's all social anyway. And I think I said this at a Taiko conference one time. But at the same time, it was really kind of disturbing and eye-opening at the same time. And so I just continued to go to the meetings and got to know everybody better and became more involved. There's just, if you're a person who's conscientious and has some kind of empathy and compassion, then the war in Vietnam is wrong. The things have to be brought to light. And we went to lots of meetings, more strong language. Alex Hings scared the bejeebers out of me when he spoke at Mills College. I can't remember what the event was.
People probably don't know who Alex Hings is.
Yeah, those kind of things. Yeah. And so we went on, and that turned into taking classes at Asian American Studies, and doing work in the community because you have to put to work what you learn, right? And that just kept going. Yeah. So once that all went rolling, we came home and we were doing work in the community, being part of the community here, Yeah.
There's a great deal of similarity in the feel of what's going on. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a great upheaval in this country. And to me, activism is just a word that just means that there are people that are getting behind an issue, an event, something, and so therefore there are white supremacists that are also activists. And so this is a very similar time. And I don't think I can really quantify, whether now there is more involvement by people. I think we see more involvement of people around us in the Japanese American community. That part of it is quite amazing to me. One of the things that I look at, and it's not the only thing, but I look at Tsuru for solidarity and how many more Japanese American lives it is touching. And, and you look at all the reasons why that's happening and you think, finally people are understanding something that's been going on all this time. It's not a new thing. So in that regard, the activism looks different. With Black Lives Matter, that is definitely not new. I think that I've lived life long enough to have seen many things that have happened to African Americans in this country for, for the entire time. It has never gone away. It has never gotten better. They can, you know, African Americans continue to be killed and just abused by this society. And so it's again become very intense. It seems like things, the upheaval, the protests against things are lasting perhaps a little bit longer, and seems like they'll go on for longer, and they should, because this just keeps happening. I mean, I look back even when before I was really aware of the real issues behind it. You know, I remember in the 50s and the 60s, this sort of thing was happening. You know, Black people were being killed. I mean, back then it was just, oh, it's just an item in the news. It's them again type of approach. And then after a while, you start realizing it keeps happening. And you know, these are human beings that this is happening to. And that's part of what my activism, that became a part of my activism, is that idea that there are human beings out there that are not, they're just not being treated like human beings. And that's kind of the crux of all of this, is that you know, there's something wrong. And so I really am thankful that, you know, number one, my parents raised me not to be, how should I put it? I'm not sure exactly how to put this. No, I didn't turn it inward and say, oh, there's something wrong with me because I'm Japanese American, I'm different from a lot of other people. You know, I was fairly insulated in this isolated community because I was in a Japanese American community. There were Mexican Americans. There weren't too many African Americans around, but there were a few that I became, you know, pretty close friends with. And so when it came down to the question of racial differences, I never thought, oh, me, I'm you know, I'm less than. You know, I really had a much more almost arrogant view of that no, they're wrong, I'm not. And so that's flavored my activism, my life. And I'm glad it's that way. And I don't mean to say that white people are bad or anything like that. I mean, it's not something inherent in them. It's inherent in the kind of system that we live under. It is the the root of all this is, unfortunately, money. It is the desire for human beings to gain more material wealth. It comes down to selfishness. And there are few people that have far more power than they should, and they abuse that, you know, and to their own gain. And that's to me the crux of what's going on. What is really wrong. And I know that that's a kind of chasing windmills type of thought and a path, but I don't feel like there's any other path to take. You know, I personally don't feel that my path is anywhere else. So
sometimes we share a brain, and that's yeah. One of the things, though, is that the activism becomes more apparent to us now, again, because of social media.
yeah.
And because we are able to connect better this way, like we are right now. I think that activism becomes more, I don't know, accessible, or more visible, and that's probably a good thing, you know, for those of us who want to get more information, to share our ideas, to support each other. So I hope that that's taking a positive direction right there, you know.
I know that there's probably going to be some disagreement, but I think it's a great opportunity. And I look at it personally. This is just personally, we have time. And so we've been able to do some projects that we've been kind of putting on hold for a long time because we didn't have the time. We were always rushing off someplace. So that opportunity is presenting itself right now. And we're trying to jump on that aspect of it. The other opportunity, oops.
I'm trying to get my notes out, yeah.
The other opportunity that I see at the moment, even though it appears to be a very negative thing, is the economics of the whole thing. You know, it's the economic system, particularly in this country, and I realize it's worldwide, is under attack, you might say. It is really getting pushed, and I believe that it is, when you really examine and analyze, you can see the fault in the way that capitalism in particular is being practiced. The way it is being applied is, these are the flaws. And you can see things like the leadership, they are putting their emphasis on things that are obviously wrong, and I hope they're obvious to people. You know, they'll spend billions on you know, bailing out their corporate friends, people who don't really need it. Well, you know, poor people don't have things like you know, health insurance. And we're the only society in the world that, you know, that really doesn't have affordable health care for people. And that's not right. You know, it's just plain old, people must be able to see that's those kinds of things are really not the way that a good society functions. And hopefully the health crisis is bringing that to light. You know, obviously it's making the economic, it's straining the economic system, but I just think that it needs to fall on its face, and it needs to be restructured, you know, maybe above all. And I know that what that says is that a lot of people will be hurt in the process. Well, you know, for poorer people, we're being hurt every day anyway, you know, and so we will have to find ways of supporting each other, of surviving this kind of a crisis. And for those who are supposedly materially much better off, well, sorry, if you fall on your face, you just, you know, you're down here with the rest of us, and so be it. And I think that scenario has to somehow play out where we come out of it being with much more equity. And so that's kind of where I think that we are at. And the other things, the racial inequities are, to me, a part of that economic system. You know, you can enslave people when you can dehumanize them easily, saying, oh, they're not even, you know, they're subhuman. And so that sort of thing has, that's how that, to me, meshes together. And it's really all one thing in a way where I hate to make it sound like it's going to sound, but it's kind of fortunate that we're in a health crisis like we are to bring certain things to light. Unfortunately, more poor people are being hurt by this. And, you know, it's just sorry that that's happening.
On a more personal note about the opportunities, I see personally, you know, just in the very few contacts that we have with people who are strangers, people who deliver our groceries to us, people who deliver our packages that we order. You know, there's more, there's an effort on both sides, on the receiving end and on the people who are delivering, that you are considerate, you know, of people's health. You're considerate of people's efforts. So you say thank you. You say, you know, you make an effort to make those connections so that you can express appreciation more, you know, overtly, and hopefully those kind of I don't know, those acts of and expressions of gratitude are passed on, you know, as they interact with other people, as we interact with other people, and just in that, perhaps it would help relationships, you know, even at that just small level. Hopefully that spreads. You know, it's that ripple. Hopefully, hoping for that ripple effect. You know?
So just as a little conversation, I just wanted to follow up. Maybe Chris, you could start by talking about who Alex is, that scared, I forget the word that you said, but who is this Alex?
So Alex Hing was a person who spoke at this conference, at a workshop, and at the time he was
in the Red Guard. He was one of the leaders of the Red Guard, and
in the Bay Area,
in
the San Francisco area,
yeah.
and he spoke. And again, I can't remember exactly what he was speaking on.
Yes, I was, and I would say Alex was kind of a Chinese corollary to Huey Newton of the Black Panthers. And the Red Guard and the Black Panthers were, you know, they did do things together. Their platforms and programs were similar, as was the Young Lords of Puerto Rico and the East Coast. And so that's who Alex was. And so presently I see him on a lot on Facebook doing Tai Chi. He's become a master of Tai Chi.
So that's who Alex Hing was.
That's who Alex is.
Yeah.
Cool. I also, you know, before even we started recording, we were talking a little bit, and Dan, you were talking a bit about these your diary, but then also diaries that extended in your family. I just would love it if you might share a little bit more on that.
Sure. So my father, and we really didn't know this until he passed away, and I was going through all of his stuff, that he had kept, so he refused to go to his pre-induction physical and was, you know, arrested by the FBI, brought to Denver County Jail. And so while he was in jail there, and later after trial going to the prison camp, he kept a diary. And of course, some days it was just, you know, we're pooped out, you know, and so he didn't write too much. But then included with all of this was the statement of why, you know, he was doing all this, why he was resisting the draft. And what happened was that when he did go to trial, instead of pleading not guilty, he pled no contest, which meant that he was given the opportunity to address the court. And so he, you know, gave the reasons why, and it's detailed in some writing that he had. And so he was given a little bit of a lighter sentence. His total sentence was about 6 months.
Explain the why.
Huh?
Explain the why.
Why of what?
Why he resisted.
Oh, okay. Well, he resisted because he was, his thought was, what is going to happen to my family, my parents? You know, and he was.
He's the oldest son.
Oh, he's the oldest son, and he was, you know, used to providing for his family. I mean, he he put his sisters through, well, basically college. They weren't
Vocational schools.
Yeah, vocational schools, and bought a ranch for his brother, things like this. And he really felt a responsibility to the family. And so he felt that if he was out of the picture, what's going to happen to them, And the Issei's were not being treated while in camp. As we know, they were looked upon as pretty much the enemy, even by some of our own people. And so that's the reason why he did this. And once he got into the federal prison above Tucson, they were, one of the earlier, not the earliest, people that were part of the prison industrial complex. They were put on the road gang. They hacked out the road that went up the Santa Catalina Mountains, and this place is desolate. I mean, if you've ever been out there, the site of that prison camp is now called the Gordon Hirabayashi Federal Recreation Center. And so they hacked out, dynamited, bulldozed, carried out rocks, and it goes up to Mount Lemmon, where there is a resort basically for people that were from Tucson that could, go to a place that's nice and cool, and they can relax. And so that's what he did. After he was released from prison, he was not allowed to get back into the Amachi Center because he was a troublemaker. And so he had to find his own way, and he eventually ended up at the Broadmoor Hotel, which is a very, very upscale resort in Colorado Springs. Yeah, and so he wrote even then, that he was there.
He was a groundskeeper in the golf course.
Groundskeeper, yeah. My writings are, a lot of it is pretty crazy stuff off the top of my head type of things, rather than this is what I did today. I mean, there was a certain amount of that, this is what I did, but I had some pretty wild, let's put it this way. At one point, I was studying the works of Chairman Mao. I had my little red book, and I was trying to understand what it was to be a revolutionary during that period of time. And again, this is perhaps some of the influence that the Red Guard and Alex Singh had on me, to think that and feel that we needed to have a revolution in this country. And so I did a certain amount of studying of that thought. And eventually I came to the conclusion that, this path is going to lead me to one place, and that's 6 feet under. I realized that it was not to take up arms and to try to go against the government is foolish. And, when you're young, you initially don't think about those kinds of things. And I'm happy that I eventually thought about that. And so we took the path of, what do our people need? And so we were examining that around the same time after we had gone through Asian American Studies, gone out into the community. And we went out into the community at the urging of some people that we had teaching Asian American Studies. And I'm looking to George Wu, who was one of our teachers, Mike Morizono, who was the pastor at Wesley Methodist Church. And we personally had a lot of influence from Hiroshi Abiko, who was at the Buddhist Church. And we
Tsukasa Matsueda.
Yeah, Tsukasa Matsueda, who was Asian American Studies. These people had a lot of influence on us in our thinking, and they gave us really good guidance, as did the community in San Jose. I have to say that the people that were in San Jose, in J-Town, guided us, took us, I look at them as aunties and uncles. They looked out for us, and tried to guide us. And we sat many a time in front of Hank's coffee shop, talking with people, with Issei and Nisei, and it was just though that kind of guidance that brought us to where we are now, and we couldn't be more fortunate and more grateful for that.
You know, that happened in both San Jose. When we left San Jose, we came here to Cortez, and at that time we were still in our early 20s, just kids, you know, and the community, you know, when you talk about it takes a village to raise a child, a small community like this just embodies that. And so it was another growing up process, especially for me, because I didn't know anything about living in the country. I'm a city girl, you know, and so it even goes for like 3 generations. My family are city people, and so it was just, you know, one of those things that I thought was going to be, you know, really nice and idyllic, and it was just hot and a lot of work. And the people here were so supportive of us being, they came to visit us when we first, you know, moved in, and they, you know, we went to church once a month for services when the minister came from Stockton, and they encouraged me to take a part-time job. You know, there was just a lot of nurturing going on. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, the activism that we practice, I think, was passed to us from generations past, when you really think about it. You know, activism isn't just based on politics, but it's just based on doing work in your community and being a part of the community. And so just from, you know, participating in community activities to getting Tomodachi Gakko, or Japanese American Cultural School, you know, in our community, getting something like that started, or even doing taiko at the elementary school with kids who don't have any Japanese, you know, background at all, but still just something to empower, you know, just giving an opportunity for them to have a voice in a different way. You know, those are all things that you just do, you know, because it's the right thing to do to build a community, you know.
Yeah, I have to say too that the way we function out here, and in other Japanese American communities, I'm sure, is that number one, you have something, a toban system, and you might be familiar with that, you know. And for out here, you know, like our church, we used to have 5 toban groups, you know, and it's down to, we just have 1 toban group because there aren't enough of us anymore. So we always operated on that system, and other Japanese Americans would be very familiar with that. But also, as farmers out here, we, well, my grandfather's generation employed the kumiai system of farming, which is the cooperative, forming a farm cooperative so that they would have a greater, they function as a much larger farm, and they were able to buy and sell and even do things like you know, make rice, shoyu, sake available for the members. You know, they would you know, send out for
make large purchases.
Yeah, and so that cooperative system is what actually saved our community from having to sell at pennies on the dollar. You know, when the war came, our people were able to come back to this community pretty much intact, you know, as communities here, Yamato Colony and Cressy Colony. And so, you know, we have seen that function. Don't tell anybody, but that's socialism. And so, And
this is being
yeah.
recorded. I don't, this is okay.
Oops. But anyway, you know,
Okay.
that's functionally socialism. And people are so afraid of that. And I've seen that all my life. You know, I'm thinking, what the heck are people talking about when they're so afraid of socialism, you know, and all of that. And so that's one of the things that it's always in the back of my mind when I'm doing things, you know, to not so much that, hey, let's have a socialist system and, you know, take over the country, but just function where you are cooperating, you're collaborating with others, you know, and always keeping that in mind, trying to work in that manner. And
Being inclusive.
yeah,
and
being very inclusive.
equitable.
I see it in the Taiko community. That's one of the things that you know, I'm not much of a Taiko player at all, but I see the way that the community functions, and I really like it. You know, it's very similar to the Japanese American community as it has been, but more. And I'm really, really pleased with the way things are going.